Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks with ADSR, and in this video, I'm gonna show you how you can take a random, almost kind of like a silly sound like a mouth snap, like this, and how we can turn that into a snare sample, maybe even a clap, depending how it goes. Now, the main takeaway from this video for you shouldn't be necessarily how to recreate this sound, but of course, I'm gonna show you step by step how we create a snare from a mouth snap. But the takeaway for you should be about getting in the mindset, the workflow of sampling your surroundings, sampling the sounds near you, and just in your immediate environment, whether that's at school, at work, in the car, in the kitchen, in your studio. You always have access to, one, a way to record it, right? Our cell phones, we can record good quality audio, and two, there's always interesting stuff around you. For instance, I have a tape measure on my desk right now because I was measuring some stuff for some acoustic panels. That'd actually be a cool sound to sample and record, maybe use it as like a percussive element in a mix or a production. So why I like doing this is twofold. It's a lot of fun. I think it spurs on creativity, and two, if you're a producer or you're a beat maker, you can layer in your own, Foley type sounds, recordings that you record yourself with samples that you purchase or that you download. And what it's ultimately gonna do is it's gonna make your music sound more unique and more interesting. So with that being said, let's dive into Ableton and turn that mouth snap into a snare. So to highlight this process for this video, I've recorded a couple mouth snaps, which I've called moth snaps. I don't know why, typo, but I've recorded a couple. And we're gonna turn it into a snare. So let's take a listen to this first one here. So that was recorded into my iPhone, and then I just airdropped that file onto my Mac into Ableton. So let's look at what we need to do to turn this into a usable sample. Anytime you record something on a phone, especially if you're outside or in a noisy environment, you're gonna have to clean it up. So you might hear it at first and be like, oh my God, like this is just unusable. Well, not really, you just have to trim things up. So we're gonna go and trim this up to about right there, and apply a little bit of a fade up here at the top. And then you can see if we play this section right here, what you can do is you can kind of find where the actual sound that you recorded stops and where the room noise begins. So I'm gonna hit Command E on my keyboard to separate this region from that other section here. And what we're gonna do is add a little bit of fade here as well. So now if I zoom back in here, we can really see that, right? So right now, what I've done is I have essentially just trimmed up the start and end points, right? Now, the next thing you wanna do is load up an EQ. We're gonna load up the EQ8 in Ableton. It could be any equalizer, any DAW, doesn't matter. And you wanna think about your sound in the context of how you're ultimately gonna use it, right? So this is not a kick, this is not a bass sound. This is something that doesn't need to have a lot of the low end occupied. So I'm just gonna carve out some low frequencies here. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do, something that you don't have to do when you're doing this, but if you have a sample like we have right now, where you had to trim the end point quite close to the actual sample's end, and you got this kind of unnaturally short decay, like that, you can introduce some almost like a normal decay that would occur in a natural room with reverb, but it's gonna be really slight reverb. It's going to be very minimal. So I'm gonna pull up FabFilter Pro R just because it's a room reverb, and I'm going to, we'll keep it on the default setting for now. We'll just work with that. I'm gonna turn the brightness down, the character down, and the distance down, and the decay rate down, and the stereo width down, and the space. So let's crank this mix down to maybe like around 1%. Right? So that already sounds so much more natural. Now, it'll help if you guys are listening to this on headphones or monitors. So just check out, we'll A/B this difference. Right? And I don't think anyone would ever hear that sample that we just played right here and be like, oh, that has reverb on it. It's literally more about just getting it to sound, natural. Right? So we'll go right there and call it good. All right, so now what I wanna do is I wanna dress it up, make it sound more like a snare sample. So if you guys don't use Ableton and I use some of these stock plugins here in Ableton, you're thinking, well, crap, how am I gonna do this? I will at least give you the theory behind what I'm doing so you can use another plugin, maybe that's native to your DAW or maybe third party. So the first thing I'm gonna load up is a plugin called Erosion. And the reason I'm loading this up is it's in Ableton, it's a simple way to introduce some noise. And we have wide and just normal noise. So if you think about a snare sample is made up into really three parts. You have your attack, which is like the tick. Then you have the body, which is gonna be tonal in nature, and how long that tonal or that tonality plays out for will determine how tonal the snare is. And then obviously you're gonna have the tail, which is usually white noise, right? So, or some type of noise. So this adds noise. right? So it's a slight effect, but you can add noise a million different ways, right? You can use a white noise sample, you can use a synth, you can use a plugin that has saturation and noise. There's tons of different ways to do that for sure. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some type of saturation. I want to saturate the noise we just added in. So we'll just use the stock saturator in Ableton, and we're gonna turn up the drive, turn the output down. Let's turn soft clip on. Right, so that's just kind of accentuating our sound. If we turn off erosion, hear the difference. Right, so what we could do is we could add another instance of erosion, kind of do like a second harmonic type idea. We'll set this just to noise, and we're gonna make this real high with the high frequency control here. So the frequency is gonna be, pretty high up there. And we can see what happens when we move this around, right? So once you establish a chain, if you're trying to like make this or make a snare sample or whatever, or even any sample, move different elements around in the actual chain. It'll actually have a huge effect on the overall sound. All right, so I bounced that in place while I resampled it. So this is the sound we have with all the effects, the processing. Now all we need to do is throw on some reverb and we should be good to go. So let's throw on the FabFilter Pro R on this, and let's make sure that our other group of effects is off. And I'm just gonna go to medium, and let's try neutral room. Let's turn the space down. Let's turn the mix down because this isn't on ascend. And let's take a little bit of the low end of the actual EQ down. That's what I love about the FabFilter Pro R is we basically have a very flexible, very, very flexible equalizer for both the decay rate and the actual EQ of the overall sound. All right, so that sounds pretty good to me. We'll turn the space down a little bit as well and turn the character up, the brightness up. So I dragged in a loop and I layered in our new snare that came from that mouth snap with it. Sounds like this. All right, so let's take a quick listen to the original sample from the iPhone to the final edited sample. And then let's look at that with the actual sample that I layered it with from the loop. All right, guys, that's gonna sum up this video. If you have any questions or comments, post those and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And if you like this video and you wanna see more videos like it, hit that like and subscribe button and smash that notification bell so you guys get updates every time we release a new video on the channel. All right, guys, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm Echo Soundworks. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.